So today we have a special treat. This is really loud. We have a Nahhas who was a local, I guess you still are, in Panama City, grew up with us. She graduated with a master's in mental health counseling from Georgia State University with a focus on trauma, and she is currently a case manager at Ridgeview Institute Women's Center for Trauma and Eating Disorders. So please give it up for Jenna. Our topic is mental health.
Okay, I'm gonna see. Can you guys all hear me if I talk like this?
Sure.
The mic is over. No, it's fine. I think it's more comfortable. So just to kind of start off, I want to say that this is you guys' space and this is your setting. So I know talking about mental health, depression, anxiety, different mental illnesses.
Use the microphone because we're sorry.
Okay, so I know that talking about these things can sometimes feel a little bit vulnerable or feel just uncomfortable, and we don't really like talking about feelings. So I want to just say this is you guys' space. I don't really know what you guys know about depression, anxiety, or mental illness in general, so I would like to hear a lot from you. I want this to be more of a discussion as opposed to me standing back here with a mic in my hand and talking at you. But to start with, we do have adults in here, which is fine with me. But I want to hear from you guys if you are comfortable, if you guys are comfortable, if you guys want this space to be more for you guys, so you can speak openly and comfortably, or if you guys don't mind the adults being here. I feel like I gave you a biased. No, I'm like, so is everybody comfortable having adults in here? Is anybody uncomfortable? I know that you're probably not going to raise your hands. Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure. Yes, they are young, absolutely. All right, so we're going to have to establish some basic rules, I guess. So because we are talking about a topic that is a little bit more vulnerable, the first thing that I say in any group that I'm in is confidentiality. So what's said in here stays in here. As far if I give you information, that's perfectly fine, but if somebody's talking about their experiences, we're not going to take that outside of this room. So no gossiping about it, no just even talking between yourselves about it. You can obviously approach that person and talk to them about it if you feel like they need support or you want to learn a little bit more about them. But in order to maintain kind of the safety of this room for everybody to feel comfortable and like they can open up, we want to say that's what's said in here stays in here. All right? Can everybody agree to that? And then one of the things I always insist on is no crosstalk. So if I'm talking or somebody else is talking, we want everybody to be focused in on the discussion. If you feel like you absolutely have to say something, the door's right there. You can take a step out and come back in. All right? All right. So to start with, I'd like everybody to close their eyes. If you're not comfortable closing your eyes, you can look down, but the point is I don't want anybody to see, except for me, kind of what's going on. So everybody close your eyes. I'll call you out if I have to. Close your eyes. Okay. All right, so I want you to raise your hand if you know somebody, anybody in your life. It could be your neighbor, it could be like your friend's second cousin, I don't know. Raise your hand if you know somebody who struggles with depression, anxiety, or mental illness. Keep your eyes closed. Substance abuse, so use of any substances like marijuana, alcohol. Okay. You can put your hands down, keep your eyes closed. Raise your hand if somebody very close to you struggles with depression, anxiety, substance abuse, an eating disorder. Put your hands down. Or raise your hand if you have ever felt stuck, hopeless, like there's no way out, like you were scared and you didn't really know why. All right, you can put your hands down. You can open up your eyes now. So, what was that like for you guys? Again, this is going to be a discussion, so you can raise your hand and talk, or we can just popcorn off of each other. So it was uncomfortable, I'm guessing. Especially at the beginning, everybody was kind of giggling and just like, oh, I don't know about this. But what was it like to be in this room and raise your hand, or not raise your hand when talking about depression? Tough crowd. All right, so this is kind of, I figured nobody would say anything. So the thing about depression and anxiety, especially within our community, is that there is a lot of stigma around it. So there's a lot of red tape, we don't really talk about it, it's not kind of uncomfortable. Even in society at large, there is discomfort with talking about mental illness. And it's, when you say mental illness, it makes it seem like this big bad, like pathological thing, which it absolutely is something serious, but it's not, if I broke my arm, nobody would have a problem saying, oh, Jenna, you broke your arm, what happened? Whereas if I was clearly depressed, people kind of knew about it, or they didn't know about it, I wouldn't be able to speak up about it, and more than likely people would feel very uncomfortable approaching me about it, just not really know how to. So there's stigma, especially in the Muslim community, when it comes to depression and anxiety and other mental illnesses. There's a discomfort with talking about it. Do you guys have any idea why?
I think part of it is that people are scared of being judged by other people.
So why would we, this is for everybody, why does it feel like we'd be judged if we had a mental illness?
You feel vulnerable.
You feel vulnerable?
People will start avoiding you.
People will avoid you?
I think that in Islam, it's like if you're Muslim, like your religion is like 24/7, like your religion is your whole life, and I feel like if you go up to someone and tell them like, I know someone who's depressed or I'm depressed or something, they're gonna be like, oh, you haven't been praying enough or something, and then
So you can become judged about your level of spirituality. And sometimes we become dismissive and say, well, you should just pray, or you should just read a little bit more Quran and everything will be better. What else? I'm hang on to that one. What's something that's attached to mental illness? So if I say that I'm depressed or I am having a really hard time and I maybe have to go see a therapist, what are people going to call me? Crazy. There's this idea that you're so messed up and that you're crazy. Why would you go to a therapist? Why would you go to, maybe you need medication. Why would you go to a psychiatrist? If you're on any medication, you must be crazy. Boys, like I said earlier, so if we're gonna talk, we're gonna take a step out, all right? So there's that general feeling that if I open up about this, I'm gonna get judged. What else might hold us back? Embarrassment. So maybe we're not only worried about people judging us, we're also we kind of judge ourselves. So one of something they call just the relationship with depression is the tyranny of the shoulds. So it has so much power, that should statement on myself. So I shouldn't have depression, or I should be better, or this person should be able to read Quran and everything would be better. So there's this power that we have, and we end up judging ourselves, or if it's a close family member, we're worried about people judging them, and so we stay very quiet to kind of avoid that embarrassment. You don't want to accept that you have it. It'll pass. So that's kind of where I want to start with. So the idea that depression can pass, or anxiety can pass. So clinically, if I am clinically diagnosed, or I'm somebody that has depression and something serious, that's got to be something that's been prevalent for, they say with adolescents, teenagers, about 2-3 weeks, and an adult it would be 2-3 months. So if I'm struggling with a constant feeling of being down, if I'm very, very hopeless, I feel very powerless, I'm starting to struggle in school, other symptoms are I'm isolating. So I feel like I really want to be around my friends, I really want to hang out with people, but I can't get myself to go. And so you feel stuck. There's a lack of motivation. What are some other things you guys would associate with depression and anxiety? So feeling bullied, yes. Laziness, so a lack of motivation. So again, it's very important to kind of notice kind of the dialogue that we have around. So like, I feel that I don't have motivation, and as a result, I'm lazy. So it starts to change the beliefs that we have about ourselves. What are some other things, what are some underlying feelings that kind of would indicate maybe that somebody has depression? What do you guys think?
Yeah, parents like stray away from you and like they don't want to talk to you.
Lack of self-confidence.
Mm-hmm.
You can see a change. You can really see a change, a negative.
A negative change. What about their energy level? They sleep all day. What about thoughts of suicide? That's a taboo thing here, to talk about thoughts of suicide. But it's a very big part of depression, and I think, especially in Islam, when we bring it up, so somebody's depressed and they say, I'm struggling with depression, or I'm struggling with thoughts of suicide, that's like the biggest taboo of all, because suicide's head on. But in any case, whether somebody's Muslim or not, obviously nobody wants to take their life at the end of the day. There is stigma around it, there's judgment around it. So what we end up saying is, oh, well, suicide is head on. If you just hold on a little bit longer and just make dua, read Quran, pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, maybe eventually, you won't feel like you need to die. Or maybe, one of my favorites is, maybe this is your jihad, this is your struggle. So you're feeling suicidal? All right, this is your struggle in this life. Get over it. That's that big get over it. It's such a big message that people who are struggling with depression or anxiety might feel like they're getting, especially within the communities. So some other things are, we think when we say depressed, people just think, oh, the person's sad. But especially in teenagers, what we start to see is people can be angry or cranky or frustrated. They're easily ticked off, so if you tell them anything, they take it very personally. And that could just be a personality trait. But if it's somebody who never used to be that way, and you kind of want to say, if I was to say, I really like your scarf, you would probably sit down and think about, oh, well, she's only saying that to me to kind of make me feel better about myself because she actually thinks that my scarf is ugly. Those are the messages. Or with the guys, somebody, this is absolutely true, and I know there's guys to say that this isn't true, but you don't get invited somewhere, people don't include you. There's a message that this is something wrong with me. And that's kind of what depression does with us. Some other related feelings are just feeling really empty, feeling hopeless. You start to not care or not like the activities you enjoyed. So let's say every Sunday you play soccer with your friends. That's probably, you're not going to have the motivation to do that, and you're not even going to be interested. So you start to believe that, okay, I'm changing. I don't really care about playing soccer. My hobbies have changed. And it's something you might convince yourself, but this has been something that's consistent in your life. And so when you start to notice, or you start to notice that your friends are no longer playing soccer, not doing the things that they enjoy, that's usually a big indication that something's going on. You start to doubt yourself. How would that play out?
You could think that you're good at something, you want to do it, and then once you go to do that something that you like, then you feel like, no, I'm not good, people would think I'm like that, because people could tell me something
Yeah. So it's like always second guessing yourself, not feeling confident in the decisions that you make. Some other things are with just behaviors and the way people might act are somebody starts to lose or gain weight rapidly, and especially at this age, with girls and with boys. One of the co-occurring things that happens. So like something that if you have depression, you might also have this, is an eating disorder, or body dysmorphia. So I look at my body and I really hate it. So usually what that is I feel really out of control in different areas of my life, and I really want to feel accepted, and so I start to focus on the physical things that can allow me to feel accepted. And really that feeling of not being accepted is something internal. So it's something that, no matter how thin I am, no matter how perfect I look, no matter how good I am at a sport, no matter how much I go to the gym, I'm always going to kind of feel like nobody accepts me. But it's a lot easier to attribute it to physical things than it is to attribute it or say that the reason this is happening with me is because of something that's happening inside. Because when it's that way, then we start to feel awful about ourselves, and it gets a little bit more difficult. Trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. So with anxiety and depression, there's if you find yourself waking up a lot in the middle of the night, you can't really figure out why. Usually there's something going on with you emotionally. Or if you really just lay in bed for hours at a time before you can fall asleep, there's that too. Moving or talking slowly, so it's just kind of that depressed, like everything's really slow. I don't really like using this example, but I don't know if anybody watches or watched Winnie the Pooh. Eeyore was like the classical depressed person. And Eeyore is the idea that we get that if somebody's depressed, they have to be so sad and so slow, and you can see it on them, but people are really good at masking what's going on with them. So, I mean, raise your hand if you know somebody who's depressed and they don't look like they're depressed. Okay. We did mention feelings of worthlessness, doubting yourself, feeling very restless, and having a hard time sitting still. So, especially now, there's a big popularity with saying somebody's got ADD or ADHD. And you would think that, well, if somebody's depressed, there's no way that they would be restless. There's no way they would have a hard time concentrating or doing well in school. They're just depressed. It's not that big of a deal. But it really does look a little bit like ADD or ADHD. So I'm having a hard time sitting still. I need to get up and move around. And that's probably because, again, something internal is going on for you. You feel very uncomfortable. You feel like you just need to do something. All right. Where do you guys think it comes from? Where does all this stuff come from? Social standards, so pressure from society. What are those pressures that you guys think all of you are probably struggling with right now? Or what are the things that you feel pressured by? Schoolwork, so to do well in school. What else? Teachers pressure you to do well in school.
Sometimes people around you pressure you. For example, I'm an audience.
So people around you with body image.
Society sometimes pressures you to look a certain way, have a certain body.
Yeah, looking a certain way.
I think your like physical health, like what you're eating helps you. Like someone I knew who had depression for years, they like before that they lost like almost 30 pounds like in a short amount of time. She lost her period for like 4 years, and then like put her into depression, but like she didn't want to eat to get it back. So I think that like it's like vice versa. Depression can cause it, or it can cause depression.
So yeah, having an unhealthy lifestyle. So especially I think during the summer, when you don't have the structure of being in school and all of that stuff, you can find that your sleeping switches around, the type of foods that you eat switch around. You're not, maybe like people are out of town, whatever it is, you're not exercising as much as you used to, or you might not be engaging with people, so you might be a little bit more isolated, or you might be hanging out with people more. But that dynamic of not having structure, not eating properly and everything can
can kind of shift everything for you and trigger those feelings. What else is there? What else do we feel pressure from?
Friendship, trying to make our friends satisfied.
Friendship and peer pressure, trying to fit in,
Parental expectations.
parental expectations, that's the big one. So I do a lot of like family therapy, and I always say like it's not a blame game. So there's different dynamics that happen in our families that we might not be aware of, our parents might not be aware of, but that definitely affect who we are as people. And it's really like, I want to say at least 60-70% of our personality, who we end up being, really does come from those roles that we play in our family. And so we might be getting messages from our parents. So let's say you have to do well in school. And as a teen, sometimes what it feels like, and the message that we might get, without our parents really meaning to, is if I don't do well in school, if I'm not successful in these areas, then I'm not worthy, or that I'm not worth my parents' love, or that my parents are going to ignore me, or I have to look or be a certain way to be accepted, even by my family. I'm really surprised we're a group of Muslims and this hasn't come up yet. So we're Muslims in America, and during this time, there's a lot of pressure. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm like feeling pretty stressed lately when it comes to my religion being here in America. So feeling pressure to fit in or to kind of mold to what society wants us to be. Always having to be defensive about who you are and about your religion. Yeah? All right. So there's, the thing about depression is they say, some people say it's 50%, some people say it's 33, but it's definitely, there's a biological component to it. So in the same way that your family, you might have a history of diabetes, you might have a history of, or a likelihood to get depression, a likelihood to get ADHD, a likelihood to have anxiety. But even if, let's say, my grandfather struggled with anxiety, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to struggle with it. The bigger thing that's going to determine that is, so I personally, I think it's more 70-30, so 30% on the biology, 70% on just kind of your life and your environment. If I'm in an environment that triggers those feelings, so feeling unworthy, feeling out of control, what are the other feelings that we mentioned? Feeling judged, feeling lazy, unmotivated. If I'm in an environment that puts pressure on me and sends me the message that these are things that are true about me, I'm more likely to develop that. Okay? All right, so I keep trying to throw this back at you guys, but you keep giving it back to me. So what are some things that you've kind of been curious about when it comes to depression, anxiety, or some things that you guys feel like you've struggled with, that you would like to talk about in here? Tough crowd. So some questions or thoughts, like what is it that you guys really want to talk about here? Because I know that there was some interest in having this topic here because you felt like there was stigma and we don't talk about this stuff in our communities. So I want to know that, like, what you guys are curious about, or what you feel like you're missing, or something you really wish that you could have said.
It's not like something I'm scared of, like, another thing like I can pressure you is like their teams or sports teams or like something you're on. You're not good enough.
So the different teams or extracurricular activities that you do. Okay.
Can you talk about how to be negative or positive, the impact on the mental health of the person?
So perceptions. So that's part of kind of that depression. So along with the pressure is I'm going to allow other people to define me. So we can kind of segue based on that So I know the topic here is the power of the mind. And I think that in clinical depression or anxiety, what happens is it really shapes the way we look at the world. But even before we officially have depression, the way we look at the world can be depressed, it can be negative. So thinking about sunglasses, everybody's worn sunglasses before, right? Show of hands. Okay. So when you have sunglasses on, sometimes they're rose tinted, sometimes they're tan, and the way that the world looks as soon as you put them on is going to be colored. So we say if they're rose colored, the world is going to look pink to you. So the thing about depression, anxiety, or negative messages that we have about ourselves is it colors the way we start to see the world. So let's say I had an experience in the past where I felt very worthless, and I had this belief that I'm just not a good person, that I made a mistake, and the message I got was, you're a bad person because you made this mistake. So then I grabbed those rose-colored sunglasses, I put them on, and then from there on out, I really start to notice the things that confirm that I'm a bad person. So I might be sitting here in front of you guys, and if somebody starts talking on the side, I'm gonna say they're talking on the side because they don't like me, and because I'm giving the worst talk in the world, and I am a bad person as a result of that, and it's gonna make me feel depressed. Or I might say that, what's another example? Of rose-colored glasses, kind of affecting the way my perception, I have a belief about myself, and it affects how I perceive the world. So, walking into a room, people are talking, whispering in the corner, they must be talking about me.
I think the big thing in this generation is social media, so I feel like if you're like, oh, my friend has this many followers, and I don't have this many, like, but I don't think like women would like to see it, like defines you, but I think that's a huge thing people think nowadays, you know?
So we get our self-worth from what other people think, or we do a lot of comparisons. And so if I have those rose-colored glasses on, I might look at the number of likes somebody has and think, oh, the reason she has more likes than me is that people like her more than me, or because I am unlikable, and that's why nobody likes my pictures. What about from the guy's side? What are some ways our perceptions affect our reality?
Mistakes in the past.
Mistakes in the past. So the thing about wearing those rose-colored glasses is maybe at the very beginning you put them on, and you're like, okay, I've got these glasses on, I know that the world looks a little bit different. But what ends up happening when you have them on all day long? You forget you're wearing them, it becomes normal to you. Like 2 weeks ago I was hiking and I had the sunglasses on and I had them on all day. And I was looking around and the sky looked so pretty, oh my gosh, I took pictures. It was like this big thing. And then later on, I guess like I got a headache from the glasses, so I pulled them off and I looked around, and it's always, I don't know if you guys feel this way, but for me it's always a shock of, whoa, this is actually what everything looks like. It doesn't look the way it does. So it could have been more beautiful, it could have been uglier without the glasses, but I've completely forgotten that my perception has been altered. So that's what happens with depression, anxiety, or just negative messages that we have about ourselves, because that's really what all of this is, that there's so many negative messages that I have about myself that I start to believe, and if I believe them for long enough, they start to control me. And I forget that these messages are controlling me. So I take off the glasses, it's pretty easy, but if I have negative messages, the way that I need to work on it is I first have to recognize that I've got the glasses on, that I do have these negative messages about myself. But we end up avoiding it because we're worried about being judged, we're worried about people telling us that you should pray, we're worried about, I guess, what are we worried about? Taking off and recognizing that we got it. Especially nowadays. So I lead a group of
10 teenage girls, and that there's like, for me, it's always a struggle of figuring out what's really going on. But everybody's always said, people want attention, and I think social media has done an interesting thing of making mental illness very obvious, so we might talk about mental illness a lot on social media. It's like this weird double-edged sword that on the one hand we can really talk about it a lot, and on the other hand, in this world, so on social media, and on the other hand, once we close that laptop, once we turn off our phones, we can't really talk about it anymore. But people do feel like I must be doing it for attention, especially things like self-harming behaviors. So cutting, that's one of the really common, and people think, okay, that must mean, somebody sees that you've got scars, you're doing it for attention, nothing's wrong with you. So that kind of segues into another thing about perceptions of, why would I have depression? Why would I have anxiety? My life isn't that bad. There's people who have it worse than me. So it's that comparison piece. Raise your hand if you've ever done that to yourself. You guys have never compared yourself to other people. Especially with kind of living here, alhamdulillah, and in America, where we are so blessed. And I know for me that, so for example, when things started happening in Syria, I became really overwhelmed, but I didn't let myself go there because I'm like, I don't have it as bad as them. I don't have bombs raining down on me. I'm safe. There's no problem here. And so what that ends up doing is we keep minimizing. We minimize. But when we minimize in that way, we invalidate ourselves. So we say that your feelings aren't valid. What I'm feeling doesn't matter. What I'm feeling, we can just kind of brush it off to the side because somebody's got it worse than me. But when we do that, we end up really kind of messing ourselves up because, of course, somebody's got it worse than you, but somebody's got it better than you as well. So sometimes you might put other people's feelings ahead of your own. I'm just going to repeat what you said out loud. So we put other people's feelings ahead of our own, and we start to really do things to make sure that they're happy, to make sure that they're not upset. And then if you think this is what you were saying, that if you keep doing that and the person still isn't happy, is that what you're saying? It really hits you. I think this is a very common thing with Muslim youth, especially having that feeling that I have to put other people's needs ahead of my own. It's a message that we get maybe from our families. It's a message we get from the masjid that you should be selfless. You should take care of other people. But what that ends up doing is I'm putting other people's emotions ahead of my own. I'm putting other people's needs ahead of my own, and I'm invalidating myself.
And sometimes when you put yourself to others, it comes off as conceited.
You're conceited, you're selfish, you shouldn't care about yourself right now.
I feel like also like in Islam, it also says not to help other people, like good people. Also in Islam, also says that help yourself, because you don't like people get blinded by it. You don't see that. It's not only the
Yeah. So it's this idea that there's no balance. And that's when we can really start to look at, if I'm living very extremely on one end or very extremely on the other, let's say I am constantly worrying about other people. That's all I'm taking care of, making sure that this person has food. Let's say you're working and you can make sure people have food, or maybe making sure that my friend is doing well in school, making sure that her relationships with her friends are good, her relationship with her parents are good, and I keep doing that and I'm not focusing on myself at all, then I'm on this end of the extreme continuum. Whereas if I'm over here and I don't care about anybody but myself, and I can't look at what's happening outside of the world, and I'm so focused on me, which is also very common with depression, that I can't really see outside of myself, and that's also a problem. And that kind of works for everything, that if there isn't a balance, if I'm on one extreme or the other extreme, usually means that there's a problem going on under the surface. So how do we combat it? How do we kind of stop ourselves from falling into these patterns? So if we're going to kind of rate it and say that it goes up, it starts with a little bit of stress and a little bit of pressure. And if we have coping skills, if we have things that we're doing, so maybe I feel very good about myself and I feel like I'm contributing back to the world when I, am, I don't know, something you guys enjoy doing, when I'm reading or when I'm writing or when I'm volunteering or anything, and I'm able to say I'm stressed out, but I also have these things to cope with my stress, I'm usually okay. But we move it up another notch and we say that now I'm feeling very pressured, I have a lot of stress, and all of the stress is up here, and my coping resources are down here. And so I get into stress mode. And then if I put a little bit more stress on you, a little bit more pressure on you, so maybe an attack happens, a terrorist attack happens, and you're already this stressed, and that happens, it's gonna push you up over here. And so I'm gonna go into crisis mode, and I'm gonna say, I'm in crisis, I feel like I absolutely can't handle anything that's going on in my life. And the negative beliefs I have about myself become stronger. I start to even let go of the things that I enjoy doing that are coping resources. I'm in crisis mode. And then you take it up another notch, and if I keep doing this to myself where I feel very stressed, I have very bad beliefs about myself, I'm not taking care of myself, I'm not communicating with other people at this point, I'm gonna go into trauma mode. Does that make sense to everybody? The thing about depression and anxiety, the thing about feeling pressure, is the more pressure we feel, the less we take care of ourselves, whereas it should be the opposite, that the more pressure I feel, the more I should take a step back and say, I need to take care of myself now. Something one of my professors told me is, you should have, however old you are, you should have that many coping resources. So if you're 17, you need 17 coping resources. So things that you can do to take care of yourself, that you can do to, maybe it's a fun activity, maybe it's, you really find yourself with read and put an, whatever it is, you should have that many. If you're 52, you should have 52 coping resources. If you're 10, you should have 10 coping resources.
There's a situation and then the person's telling you something and you're like have something else to say and you're like, oh no, they're right because like the lack of self-confidence, you're just like, no, you're right, I'm wrong. And then you just like start to adapt to their ideas and then you just like don't, and you can't like tell your ideas to someone because you just
So you feel like you don't stand for, it's that feeling of if I don't stand for anything, I'll fall for everything or anything. So if I constantly, I can change what I believe, and then I don't really trust myself, and so I'm more likely to believe something as gets told to me than I am to trust myself. So how do we kind of get out of that? What do we do?
Going from changing mindset, going from maybe possibly doing a fixed mindset, trying to look like a growth mindset.
How do we do that? So what if I don't even realize that I have a negative mindset?
Possibly instead of being reactive to everything around you, try to be proactive in what you're trying to do.
Or what if you're super depressed and you have no motivation and you're feeling very defensive?
Get help.
You get help? You might go to a therapist and get help. So focusing, I've got some negative, but I've got some positive too, so challenging those thoughts. Again, when you're in a bad state of mind, and it doesn't have to be that I'm so depressed that I can't, and I have depression. It could just be that I've been having a really rough time, and I have these beliefs about myself. The thing about beliefs is I believe them. So I might say that shirt is orange. And I believe that shirt is orange. And every single one of you guys in this room can tell me your shirt is not orange, it's red. That's red, right? So help us a little bit. But everybody can tell me that shirt is red. but I'm not going to believe them because that belief is so strong about myself. So how do I challenge it?
I feel like a lot of people who are so into depression, and that's what they're like, just that it can get better. It's like it can help, but also get understand themselves. It can get better. Like they don't really know that. They're just so caught into depression, and they're so like they're looking for kind of help, but it's too late. Really, when they get started, like I think that's just what they have set in their minds, and they think they're like they're struggling as
It's like that feeling of hopelessness, it'll never get better. Absolutely. So that's my job. Like when I was training, every single, mental illness that we got, and it said, how do you treat this? The first thing it says is establishing hope, establishing hope, establishing hope. But I've got, even if you don't believe, so I'm saying that your shirt is orange, your shirt is orange. You guys have got to tell me, okay, I understand that you see that shirt is orange. That's how you're perceiving it, and that's your reality at the end of the day. My reality is that shirt is orange. So if you guys keep telling me, Jenna, the shirt is absolutely red and you're stupid, you just need to stop. Maybe taking it from a different angle of, yeah, this is your reality right now, but let me help you recognize why the shirt is not orange and why it's red. And maybe comparing it to different red shirts, or putting red and orange next to each other and showing me that, hey, this is the red and this is the orange. I know using these examples feel very basic, but it's how it works. It's the same thing that if I believe that I'm a bad person, then you might tell me, no, Jenna, you're not a bad person, and here's the evidence against that.
I feel like a lot of times whenever people are depressed, they don't, if people think I'm not hurting, there's so much like help around them, like they just don't get better. Even though they get like a lot of resources and people trying to help them and stuff, like if they don't have like these resources, like they don't get better.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So one of the hardest parts of my job is when I get somebody who's really struggling, but they're not really ready. So I usually take it from that. It's not necessarily that they don't want to get better, it's that they're not just ready. Because, depression, anxiety, all of that, if I say I want to get better, it's really just about making a change. And if I've been living this way for all of my life, if I've had negative beliefs about myself, or I've compared myself to people my entire life, or if I've just been negative my entire life, it's a habit. It's not so basic as I have this belief, I take a Prozac or I take medication and it's gone. It's a habit. I'm used to doing it, and so even say neural pathways. So in my brain, my thoughts, the way everything works, it's going to be triggered. So I see something, I see a red shirt, I'm going to say it's orange because that's what my brain is used to doing. That's the neural pathway that it automatically clicks to. And so we've got to pause ourselves in the moment and say, all right, what's going on with me? Did you raise your hand? Okay, I thought somebody had raised their hand here. So we said you challenge the beliefs to kind of, if we're going to fight against the stuff, we want to challenge the beliefs. We might seek therapy. What else can we do? So starting off with gaining more self-confidence and loving yourself.
I feel like some people when they start depression, in depression, they're still with their current group of friends, or around the same environment, or like in the same clubs or something, and maybe some people just get attached, and maybe that's why they're not feeling better. And maybe it's those people who they're comparing themselves to. So I think some people need to understand it's okay to change up your life and change where you're hanging out with, change what you're doing, and just make yourself better.
So changing your environment. I think sometimes it can be difficult. Let's say you are in an environment at home that's really, really unhealthy. You've got some home abuse going on, which is another super taboo topic in our communities. It's going to be very difficult. So along those lines of changing my environment, the most important thing is going to be to talk about it. Talk about it with anybody, with somebody that will hear. So I might approach one of my friends and tell them, and they can't necessarily handle it. But in that case, that person can go to an adult, and they can go to somebody who's has a little bit more power and control over the situation. But the big thing is being able to speak up about it first. So I'm not going to be able to go to a therapist. I'm not going to be able to change my environment. I'm not going to be able to do anything until I talk about it. So if I've been struggling, so if anybody's kind of heard right now that any of this stuff has really clicked for them, that like, oh, that's me, then talk about it. And it might not be this big thing of, I've got to, talk about it and have a big long conversation, or it might not even be this thing of I've got depression, but I think, especially at this age, you guys have a lot of pressure, you guys do have a lot on your plates, and on top of it, you guys are Muslim youth in America at a really difficult time right now. And to be able to just kind of sit down and talk about what's going on underneath the surface for you and what beliefs you have about yourself, even if it's just with your friends. I know it sounds so cheesy, it sounds very phony, like we're not going to sit down and talk about our feelings. But giving yourself that opportunity and taking the judgment out of it will be really important.
I think if you can find like a friend that that won't really judge you or could possibly like help in a way, or like I don't know, like a sister or a sibling or something like to talk to.
Having somebody to talk to, somebody you trust. That's important. So Susan mentioned earlier that sometimes it's our environments that might affect us, so we've got to be able to figure out and know that, okay, I have at least one person. So I'm not going to go to my friend who's constantly criticizing me and comparing herself to me or anything and tell her, hey, I've got depression, or hey, I'm really struggling with these beliefs about myself, because maybe she's somebody that's triggering those feelings for me. I want to go to somebody who's safe, somebody that I trust. And it could be a close friend, it could be even somebody that you don't really know that well. Sometimes it feels a little bit safer to go talk to somebody that you don't know that well, because hey, if they judge you, it's not going to affect your friendship at the end of the day.
I feel good when I speak to mom.
That's absolutely a good thing, speaking to your parents about it.
No, not that, just mom.
Just mom. So, the things that hold us back from being able to speak about it, just like I said earlier, is that stigma, it's that fear of judgment, it's fear of pathologizing it, so making it seem like it's this big bad thing. So, again, like if I broke my arm, I wouldn't walk around with a broken bone and just like expect people to, like Majid, I don't know what that's wrong with that. But I mean, did you, when you did whatever it was that you did you walk around with it like that? What'd you do? You went to the hospital. Yeah, that's a little bit extreme, but I'm not expecting everybody to go to the hospital. But, I mean, I'm guessing first you said something's wrong with my arm. So something's wrong with my arm, I'm gonna talk about it, I'm gonna say maybe I gotta go to the hospital. So I'm feeling bad about myself, I'm feeling like I can't sleep, I'm feeling unmotivated, I'm feeling like no matter what I do, nothing changes, or I'm very out of control. Talk to somebody, and maybe the solution is just you are able to connect with somebody and you start to feel a little bit better about yourself. Or maybe it's a little bit a step up and you've got to go see a therapist. It's really not that big of a deal. I need people to come see me so I can make money. But it's at the end. That was a joke, guys. It really was. I can't treat any of you. But it's just somebody to talk to. Or maybe it is going to be a step up and you're going to have to go to a psychiatrist if things are really bad. But you've got to take that initial step. Yeah.
I also feel like that before you can go to the point of yourself to go to talk to somebody, you have to actually accept that there's something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the hardest point to actually start
Yeah.
the whole process.
Mm-hmm. So that's why we have discussions like these. It's to kind of take away that stigma about it, to say that it's okay, it's normal. That's not to say that one of my struggles is saying, yeah, it's normal, and then we say that like everybody in society's got depression, and then the way that America likes to deal with it is say, all right, free medication for everybody. It's not necessarily the case, but everybody does struggle with depression, some sort of depression. Everybody does struggle with anxiety. It's really common. Let's take away that stigma and say, all right, it's a feeling. It's something that's happening for me. And it's a feeling that's changing the way I'm viewing the world. And so it can really start to affect different areas. So if I'm not able to speak up about it, and I'm struggling with depression, and I'm doing worse in school because that's what it does, or I'm losing my friends, or I have a bad relationship with my parents. Well, if I don't start to treat that stuff early on, then it's going to be with me for the rest of my life. So the more beliefs that I develop about myself that are related to depression, the more I'll kind of capitalize on them, and next thing you'll find yourself an adult, and these are the beliefs you have about yourself, and it's a lot harder to change your beliefs about yourself as an adult than it is when you are kind of younger.
Some people like to take on mistakes, and then like when you take on it, and like when let's say like you did a lot of good things, but then you did this one mistake, they like to take on it, and then that gets to you, like okay, like it was like all this wrong, and then you're like, okay, I can't do anything right, and then you just like stay with you.
It's part of that perceptions. It's called focus. It's like the focusing on the negative. So I might, like a classic example is I'm driving to the grocery store and somebody cuts me off, and I notice that. And then I'm driving, I come to park in a spot, somebody steals my parking spot. I notice that. Walk into Publix, somebody grabs the cart I wanted. I notice that. Standing in line, like to check out, somebody's glaring at me. I notice that. And that's all the stuff I notice. So that's my perception. I'm only noticing those negative things. What ends up happening though is I don't notice the person who smiled at me in the car next to me, the person who let me pass when I needed to turn into Publix last minute, the person who gave me their cart after the other person stole the cart, the cashier being super friendly to me even though the person was mean. We don't notice that stuff because it takes a lot of energy and a lot of time to really be focusing on the negative.
Like it's something that you feel like when there's someone that you can, when there's someone that you can go to, and there's someone that you cannot go to, you always go to the person you always go to the person. When you know this person, like you feel comfortable, and someone you don't feel uncomfortable, someone you can feel, yes, because you want them to like you and feel comfortable with you, so you always turn to them, you always go to them, and you leave that person to be like, oh, okay, I even have to slow down, and then it's different, and I want them to.
So the people who have negative beliefs about us, or the people who are giving us negative messages, we really are attracted to them. Especially if I've already got negative messages about myself, I'm going to kind of lean towards the people who prove that stuff. But in the same breath, that I'm going to also seek out the people who create more of a challenge in my life. So it's a lot harder to go to that person and have that person accept me. But it's focusing on the external as opposed to focusing. So the problem is that this person doesn't like me, and it's not that there's something going on underneath the surface. Does that make sense to you guys?
I think that one thing that, like society today, that happens a lot, is that, when you claim to be like a really, really good person, and like do a lot of good things, and then you make that one mistake, and then it's like, you've been labeled as like that one thing, it's like become you. And it's like, then everyone's trying to like, who's good about you, and then it's like, they keep talking about it and all that, and it just kind of still bringing you down because it's like, okay, well, that was a mistake, I know that was wrong. Like, there's all this other stuff that I've done, and this is like,
Yeah, I really like that 1%. Now, some people that, like, I'm not like, some people just like, oh, I'm a little that, and I can continue doing this because I'm already that, whatever I can do, and it's really hard to change back to that because you've done that one thing that's kind of there, so just they continue doing something, and then some people we don't like to address them, you're like, oh, you did that, and then you're like, what can I do better, and then they're like, I don't know, you can on your own, you should, but also like don't like try to like tell them.
Did you hear that, guys?
People don't realize that people are gonna have mistakes, they're going to be experiencing things and that's what they really do. But also, I mean, for one thing, you're still learning how to cook up. Like people think that you should be good consistently all the time. And especially like, for example, because we were like meditation, the big deal is big
So there's not really much room for error. There's not much room for making mistakes.
I think for me, really, it's not as like, I feel like as kids, and especially with like such, I don't want to say like strict parents, but I feel like parents in like the Muslim community definitely like enforce education more than other parents would. I think that like you're always just striving for perfection. This is like a bad example, but like if you got like a 95 on a test, instead of being like, wow, I got 99 with 20 questions right, that's a lot of questions. You'd be like, I got one wrong, you know?
So that's those messages and that pressure that we felt, that we might feel. So the girls have got a lot of good material for why it can be so, we might fall into a state of depression or fall into like, start feeling really anxious and having negative beliefs about ourselves. I'm sure that the guys do too, but as is normal, guys tend to kind of not want to talk about their feelings and talk about what's happening. But talking about feelings is manly, guys, so you should do it. All right? It is.
That person, you could be like, for example, with soccer, you could be like, oh, well, I'm not good at soccer, so I should like find something else, or I should stop, and then it just stresses them out so much, and they learn to do that, because they can be good at soccer.
Did you guys hear what Yasmin said? Yasmin, right? You guys hear what she said? Somebody said, yeah. Can somebody repeat that for me? Is this funny to you? Talking about depression? I know it seems funny, guys, but it is serious. It's something that, especially guys, I think girls are a little bit more forthcoming about talking about it, and so, you know, they've got different types of risk factors, but guys, like one of the big things about depression is that it causes you to say, I don't want to speak up about what's going on with me, and it might look a little bit different for you all, but I think this is a serious topic, and I know it can be uncomfortable, but I want to.
Okay, you know, if you don't mind, I want to just add something, you know. Changing the term itself can change the perception. So if you have a heart disease, you'll not be ashamed to have a heart disease. As Jana said, you have a broken arm, that's fine, you can walk without that, without problem. So now they change the term of the mental illness. It is not mental illness anymore. Mental illness meaning like severe, like schizophrenia or bipolar, but now it's called a brain disease, like you have a heart disease. So it'll be very easy for everyone to talk about it. So as you take medicine for high blood pressure or for diabetes for the rest of your life, so what you take medicine for anxiety and depression, and you feel normal, and perform your life normally as other people. So I think changing the term is very important now, and I think it's been changing now. And every patient comes to my office, I don't tell him that you are crazy or not mental illness. You don't need even a psychiatrist, just you have a kind of changing the chemicals in your brain because it's a brain disease and you need the medicine, and that's all. Do you agree with me, Jenna?
Okay, yeah. Changing what we call it. So, what was it? I'll come back to it later. Yeah, so that's a big pressure thing with gender roles. Is that everybody's got different types of pressures, and so that message of suck it up, man up, guys don't cry, men don't cry. Raise your hand if you've ever heard that. Don't cry, you're a man. No, but it's a real message, and there's a message that I can't talk about what's going on with me because I need to be a man. Maybe it's not accurate for you guys, but I think it's pretty telling when we have a discussion about anxiety, depression, like diseases of the mind, And we've got the girls very willing to open up and talk about what's happening with them, and the guys are like, okay, we're gonna turn around and just kind of whisper amongst ourselves and not talk about this stuff because we're guys, we don't want to talk about it. They're macho men.
I feel like for most guys, we just feel like it's common for us to just shrug it off. Just chill.
Work it out, yeah.
Work it out ourselves.
Or go take someone close that we like talk to.
Hey guys, Majid's talking, let me hear him.
I was wanted to ask you a question, like, one of your friends is like struggling with depression, and you talk to him about it, and he listens to you, and you try to help him, but he doesn't want to help. What are you supposed to do?
What do you mean by trying to help him?
Like, you're trying to be there for him and help him out, support him, and like everything you tell him, he's doing the opposite. And at the end of the day, he still says he's suffering with depression. So what are you supposed to do as a friend? Like, I advise him, but.
So a big thing is making yourself available. This works for everybody. Is making yourself available to that person. I think what happens a lot is if we see somebody struggling, we really want to solve it for them. We really want to make it better because as humans, that's what we do. We like to help people. But there has to be a recognition that you can't make it better for him. You can be supportive to him. You can play a role in his life or her life. But at the end of the day, it's going to be that person's responsibility to take care of themselves. So a big thing that I talk about in my groups is we don't give advice. So if somebody talks about something they're really struggling with, we don't give advice. We actually encourage people to talk about what's going on underneath the surface. Because if I give you advice or I tell you what to do, it disempowers you. So it takes away the power from you. You can't solve your problems at that point. And it might become a dynamic that if I don't know what to do, I'm going to go and ask you, and maybe that person might become dependent and reliant on you. We really want to give that person the opportunity to fix things for themselves. You can give suggestions, you can give feedback. I think the most important thing is if you know somebody who's struggling is asking them, what do you need? In what ways do you feel supported? So maybe somebody you think that the way to support them is to always be there with them, always be next to them. But that type of support is actually overwhelming to them. And what they're needing is maybe for you to routinely maybe call them at 5 o'clock every Wednesday, and that's what they're needing. But the big thing is just asking the person. Because every person, what they're going to be needing in depression, anxiety, whatever it is, just negative beliefs, it looks different for every single person.
I was wondering if you can touch on the use of illicit drugs as far as a cause for depression and also a way to escape depression.
So self-medicating is really common, especially in our generation, especially using things like marijuana, cigarettes, alcohol. It's a lot easier to numb out the feelings than to deal with them. But something that's really common with anxiety especially is that if you start smoking pot, or you start using pot, it usually tends to increase your anxiety. There's also some evidence that if you've got, you have a history, or you have, like, you biologically might have a chance of getting schizophrenia. It's a chance within you, so you have a family history. If I'm smoking marijuana, that's going to shoot up. I don't remember exactly what the percentage is, but it shoots up because it changes your brain chemistry. I don't want to make this a lecture about drugs and alcohol, but it absolutely, these are very real things that we might feel ourselves. We might feel pressure to use them. We might feel that these are things that we're become dependent on. I know we talked about marijuana not being something that we can get addicted to, but you can absolutely become psychologically addicted to it. In the same way, addictive behaviors, it serves the same function as self-harming behaviors. So cutting can become addictive. Eating disorder symptoms, so restricting, throwing up, binging, purging, all of that stuff, it's all addictive because we're using it to numb out what's going on with us, or we're using it to kind of cope with something. And so it becomes the fastest thing that we go to. Did that answer a little bit?
I think she's
You spoke about talking to someone. There may be some, the girls have spoken out, but not every one of them has. When you're in that state, there may be sometimes you feel that you can't talk to your parents and you can't talk to your friends. In the UK, they will have helplines. And as Muslims, I think even in our local communities, we need to have maybe helplines where the youth can talk anonymously, because just talking it out can be a big relief. Because they might feel that they have these friends, but they don't know where it's gonna go. Or they don't want to be labeled, or they don't want anything, they just need to talk it out. So we need to think about helplines or counselors who would be there and anonymously just come and talk to us and advise the best way as a professional. Even or professional helplines where they can call youth specifically to call if they feel that they can't reach out to their parents, they have no end, but they have to have someone to talk to.
So that's, I know I'm a little bit out of time, so it's a perfect segue. I have one resource for you guys. It's called stonestobridges.org. You guys can write it on your phones or do anything, and I'll also give that information to Hamo Amen, so we can give it to you guys at the end of the day. But there's a resource online called Stones to Bridges. And they have, it's about Muslim mental health. They have an advice column called Dear Fatima, and it's, helps you kind of, you can put stuff out there, it's advice, especially advice related to beliefs that we have about ourselves or the things that you might be struggling with. It's got a find a local Muslim therapist. I don't think we have maybe one person here. No, we don't have anyone. But finding local Muslim therapists, and there's different resources and articles online. So it's a little bit of that. I know that on the national front, there's a lot of work. I think we have a couple of hotlines, but they're not officially up yet, up and running. But even within that, something I always advocate for is calling a normal hotline, 1-800-SUICIDE, guys, or, it's not most of the people who use those hotlines, they're actually, they're just having a really rough time, and it's somebody that they can talk to. That just because we're Muslim doesn't mean we have to go to a Muslim person. People are trained to treat people, and they're trained to have multicultural confidence. And if they're not, then they probably shouldn't be doing the job. But there is a fear about talking to somebody who isn't like us because, they're going to judge me, or they're going to think that, this Muslim's history is different. But, it's a way of kind of getting involved in the community. If you go out, you see a therapist, maybe they don't know that much about Islam, but you end up teaching them a little bit. And so by you going to that therapist, now suddenly they know a little bit more about it, and they're more likely to be able to treat other people who are struggling. The biggest thing, guys, is talking, just opening up about it in whatever way that you feel like you need to. I can give you guys my email if you feel like you need to shoot me an email, and you can do it anonymously. You can talk to each other. I think something I'd really like to see is, it sounds like you guys, at least for the girls, I don't know about the guys because I didn't hear much from you, but it sounds like there's a lot of things that you guys are struggling with. So getting together maybe in the same way that we have halaqas routinely, incorporating these things into halaqas and talking about them. And then also just recognizing that it's okay, it's common. I don't know the statistics, but I want to say that over 50% of Americans, for sure, are struggling with something like this. And the big thing is it's not a life sentence. People think that okay, I've got depression, it means I'm going to have it for the rest of my life. Maybe you do. Maybe you've got really severe clinical depression, and it's the same thing as heart disease. Or maybe it's just something you're going through at the moment and you really need help and support around it. But the big thing is recognizing that there's hope, and recognizing that you get the way to get that help is by speaking up about it. Because if I kind of stay silent, people aren't necessarily going to know what's going on with me, and they're not going to know how to support me. Right? I know I'm out of time. Do I want to open it up for any questions, or?
That's fine, 5 minutes is fine, 5 minutes.
Okay.
I definitely agree with the changing stuff when you're with school with the changes and stuff, but I think also for coping, if you like to do art, maybe draw painting, don't draw a depressing painting, draw your struggle but in a positive way, write poetry, put your struggle out there in a positive way, place forward, use your anger, depression,
Yeah. There's going to be a lot that can be said still. It's a very broad topic, but using the different coping skills, doing the things that you enjoy doing, making lists of the pros and cons, or focusing on the positive things, Big thing is affirmations. So if I have negative beliefs about myself, maybe writing down the things that I like about myself, the things that are positive, routinely going over that. And I sometimes say fake it till you make it. So I don't believe that I'm a good person. But if I keep telling myself, you're a good person, you're a good person, you're a good person, you're a good person, eventually it might kind of stick with me. Okay, any other questions? All right, and just before we conclude, I want to tell you guys that the activity we did at the very beginning with raising your hands, the majority of the room raised their hands for every single one of those questions. The majority of the room. So questions about, do you know somebody who has depression? Do you have a loved one who has depression? Have you ever felt this way before? The majority of you raised your hands. And I think kind of speaks to everybody's eyes were closed, so it felt a little bit safer talking about that. But it's a real issue, and I think that when we start to recognize that other people are struggling too, it can feel a little bit safer talking about it. All right, one last.
When you're talking to pressure by people to do something wrong, and then if you don't do it, then you're not going to inspire you, and then you have to do that when you want to do it, and then if you don't, then once you say no, then you say this and all that, and then they're like, if you want to do it,
I think that goes back to what's happening underneath the surface. So if I'm going to say, no, I'm not going to do this, I want to validate myself. So say, I know it's going to be difficult, that people are going to have a hard time accepting me. And so changing your environment and then not allowing those things, saying that these people might want to do this thing, but this is what's going on with me. But it is a very big self-confidence piece. It's a big thing that's related to the beliefs that you have about yourself and then your environment. That it's definitely really difficult to do the right thing when everybody around you isn't. So then that's what we want to address. So we want to address working on your self-confidence, working on how do I build myself up so that when I do make these decisions, I get better. And that might be through the things that you said, doing the positive, focusing on the positive as opposed to the negative, working on different activities, affirmations, making a list of, doing the things that you love doing, the things that you know that you're good at, or you don't have to be good at it, but just, loving.
May I say something? As one of the oldest of you all, hearing you, you made me feel I need some counseling. We are being enslaved by these things that depression, stress, mental illness, all of these things. I am almost 7 years old. I was born and raised in a very difficult environment. I was forced to escape. I never thought of seeking counseling. I was imprisoned. I was a refugee. I came to America without any knowledge of this world of yours. I went through a lot of things. I never thought of seeking counseling here and there. This man-made counseling. I know you're young. You live in this beautiful country, but you are spoiled a little bit. This is why you talk about depressed things and that. I urge you, with due respect to our sister, that counseling that we people, because I went the other day to my friend's home, they have someone, I think 2 or 3 children your age. And the mother said to me, they need counseling. I said, sister, you talk to them. Did you make them talk to you? Or welcome them to talk to you? So if we go on like this, talking about it being depressed, I know you're young, you face a lot of things. I went for a cup of coffee earlier because I did not get to eat with you. So I entered that restaurant having this. Before I entered, that place, I thought, well, they will look at me. They will not serve. They will do this and that. So we prepare ourselves to become a target. Or to feel that we are not liked. Or we are. So these things are very dangerous. And I like what you're saying. But if we talk so much about these things, talking, repeating, repetition, it is very end of these things. So I urge you, of course, to have knowledge of all these things. But the most important thing is to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as Allah said, وَالْقُرُوا يَذْكُرُكُمْ, to be always with Allah. Because if we stress on these things, I'm afraid that we'll become enslaved or victim, and we will involuntarily will believe that we need counseling, or we are, depressed, or all these terms that are being used nowadays. These media and all these things, they are making us all patients.
Which is exactly kind of my point of, we don't want to pathologize it. It's just a feeling. It's something that's going on in your life. From my perspective, my job is really just to listen and feed back things to people. I'm not a very big proponent or for somebody who really advocates for medication and making somebody a patient. But I think in that the society that we live in today, there is a lost art of listening, that we as human beings don't really listen in a correct way, which is why sometimes there are people who are trained to listen and to give feedback and to support people. And I absolutely respect that, you've gone through things and you never felt like you needed support, but I think it can be very invalidating to an individual who might be struggling. There's very real things such as substance abuse. Our youth are, substance abuse, can't sort of speak about this, but different problems that you see in society at large they're actually common to a higher extent within the Muslim community. So you think marijuana use, it's higher in the Muslim community. You see alcohol abuse, you see it higher in the Muslim community. Eating disorders, so high in the Muslim community. So it's not a matter, I absolutely agree that talking about it, we might create a problem from something that isn't there, but there is a problem. I mean, the number of Muslim youth who are self-harming, who are cutting themselves to reduce pain is very high. And so to say that, because we didn't do it in the past, and things were different in the past. There was a different environment, there was a different shape, but even during the Rasulullah's time, he struggled with depression. He struggled. There was discussion of it. There was very clear when somebody reported that they were struggling with depression or struggling with severe feelings, he told them to chew on barley. Barley has a natural SSRI in it, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which is what is common what you see inside of medications now. So it's not something new, but it's a different way of talking about it. And the big thing about this is we don't want to pathologize it. We don't want to say this is a big disease that you're struggling with. But these are things that we feel pressure, and maybe in the past we haven't felt the ability to talk about it, and I'm just saying we need to be able to speak about it.
I think what Sheikh Burhan's point is that is somewhat valid. In the sense that everybody has feelings. Negative feeling happens. Is it 80 times it happens that it becomes a disease, or it is 10 times it happens it becomes a disease, or it is normal? So what he's probably, what he's trying to say is we are trying to bring it out more and more in that sense. Now the other thing I was saying that I think we should keep ourselves busy with things which we like, and the most important, physical exercise. Physical activity. I think that is very important to part of the solution.
I agree. Releases endorphins, makes you feel better, feels healthier. There's different things that we can do, but given that that's something that's decreased in our society at large, given that we're not doing that stuff, then we need to start talking about why and what's going on for us underneath the surface.
I know you spoke about this, you mentioned it, but I think it's also important. I know people who are depressed and their parents tell them, well, there's people suffering, there's people who are starving, get over it. And so I think that we are blessed, we do have a lot of blessings from that, but we need to understand that in the mind of a teenager, this is the end of the world. And even if we don't see it as adults, so we need to just make sure that we understand that, this is a problem for you, and so it is a problem. Like, we don't have to lessen it. So I wanted to get your opinion on that, and also, as Muslims, we have a habit of saying, just be patient, it'll pass, just be patient, read Quran. And Muslims don't feel sad, because we are blessed with Islam and everything, which is true, but at the same time, like he says, that the Muslims feel sad too, it's part of nature, and just touching upon it.
I asked the earlier question about how the negativity and positivity affects the mental health. In my opinion, mental health can be caused by the person himself. Okay? If you are negative, you mean isolated. You isolate yourself and you become exclusion to your mind and you look into holes around you. And normally when you become negative, you start to develop different things. I'm not good, I'm not worth nothing, and this person telling me this way, this person. And you need to become positive in life. Islam teaches us as to be positive in life. All the Quran, all the ayat, it tells us how to look to life as a positive person, how to appreciate the life itself, how to live the life and to be open to the whole humanity, not only the Muslim community or to this community or this community, but the whole humanity, to appreciate the arts, the music, to appreciate the power of creativity of another person who could be not Muslim, to increase when you increase your ثقافة, intelligence and your understanding, you become positive and you become open and you become contribute to the society and you never get any mental health. But you get mental health mostly because you are captured to a certain ideology, which is, by the way, Islam is an ideology, but is not an exclusion ideology. It's an open ideology for the whole humanity. And that's very important as a Muslim to be open in order to be a da'iyah, in order to be a representative to Allah, to others, that to be open, very educated, understanding what you're looking for the society, how to participate in the society, how to be active in the society in general, and how to make this reflect in your attitude to be giving as a positive person, not as a negative person. And by this way, you eliminate mental health totally. Thank you.
Is that one last question or one last comment?
I think we have one last comment. Yeah, saying you can have it, but saying you can't be sad because people have it worse than you, well, that is the same thing as saying, well, you can't be happy because other people have it happier than you. I think the big point I really want to conclude on everything that I've said, is something that to remember. I know several depressed individuals who have found that they really want to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they really want to be spiritual, and they do feel close to Him. But that message of if you just turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything will get better, can be very shaming, can make the person feel like, well, you're telling me I'm a bad Muslim, and that's the negative belief that you have about yourself. But it's a big thing that I want to communicate is that there's a stuckness, and it takes hard work and it takes effort to get out of this and to stop having the negative thoughts. It's hard work, and I think it's very easy to feel like you've got to give up. So what I really want to leave with you is that if you see somebody struggling, it's giving them that hope and supporting them so they can take the steps to get rid of feeling trapped by their negative thoughts, to get rid of feeling trapped by their negative emotions. That it's not just, all right, I'm going to read Quran and I'm going to feel better right now. It's work, it's changing the way you think, it's changing habits. But I'll conclude with that.
Negative, that's the website, right? That's one way of communicating. Actually, the landing page is really format anonymously as Fatima. So you can ask Adra, you can go on our website and share your story or ask your questions. And are there any other ways of communicating if they want? Very good. Okay, I will take that and we will announce it later on. Thank you so much.
So I like myself to be practical, okay? So to be practical, this is not the end here. We need to also work on that. So I like the idea of Sister Farida and also Host Nahhas. We need to have helpline and hotline. As we volunteer as a physician in the community, also we have to volunteer as a therapist in the community. So inshallah we work on that through the Abyssinia clinic to have inshallah work with the therapists. We have maybe 3 or 4 therapists in the community. And I'm very sure they love to share the knowledge with us. And by the way, this is my opinion, maybe wrong, it's kind of zakat, you know, if you have 2.5% of your money to be donated, I think also you have a small portion of your knowledge to be donated or to be shared with the community. So inshallah we'll do that, but before we go to the helpline, talk to your mom, to your mother. This is the most important therapist in the village. Okay, just open up to your mother first.
First.
First. Okay, and then after your mom, talk to Jana, okay?